The morning of my eviction, I opened the door to my landlord, ready for the final humiliation. But he wasn't looking at me. He was staring, with a look of pure, horrified shock, at the old man in a wheelchair who had just arrived to thank me for helping him the day before. My landlord's face went white, and he whispered a single word that saved my life. Before we get into it, I'd love to know, what city are you watching from today? And be sure to subscribe for our daily stories. Okay, let's head to that steep hill. My life for the past few years had been a beautiful, chaotic, and deeply unprofitable mess. My small, one-bedroom apartment was more of a studio than a home. The air thick with the smell of turpentine and oil paint. The floors a Jackson Pollock of accidental drips and splatters. I was an artist, a painter. And like so many artists before me, I was brilliant at my craft and absolutely terrible at paying my rent on time. The final warning notice from my landlord, a notoriously sharp and unsentimental businessman named Mr. Thorne, was currently sitting on my kitchen counter, a stark, white rectangle of reality in my colorful bohemian world. It stated in no uncertain terms that if my 3 months of back rent were not paid in full by tomorrow, eviction proceedings would begin. I had spent the entire demoralizing afternoon trying to prevent that. I had lugged my best canvases to 3 different downtown galleries, my heart full of a fragile, desperate hope. And I had been met with 3 different and equally polite versions of no. Your work is very passionate, one gallery owner had told me, but it's not very commercial. I was walking home, defeated, the heavy portfolio case in my hand feeling like it was filled with lead. The hill leading up to my apartment building was a final, cruel insult. It was a steep, unforgiving incline that left me breathless even on a good day. Today, it felt like climbing a mountain. It was halfway up that mountain that I saw him. He was an old man, probably in his 70s, sitting in a heavy-duty electric wheelchair, and he was stuck. The light on the control panel was dark, the battery clearly dead. And he was trying, with a series of grunting, frustrated, and deeply prideful efforts, to push the heavy deadweight wheels himself. He was getting nowhere. My first instinct, the one born of my own exhaustion and a profound, all-consuming self-pity, was to just walk past. I had my own impossible hill to climb. I didn't have the strength, literal or metaphorical, to help anyone else with theirs. But then he let out a low, angry curse, and he smacked the arm of his chair with his fist, a gesture of such pure, human frustration that it broke through my own wall of misery. I saw not a stranger, but a fellow traveler in the land of quiet desperation. With a sigh, I changed course. "Looks like you're having a tough day," I said, my own voice a little rough. He looked up at me, his eyes a sharp, intelligent, and deeply irritated shade of blue. "The damn thing died without any warning," he grumbled, his voice a gravelly rasp. "Second time this month." "It's a steep hill," I said, stating the obvious. Do you need a hand?" "I don't need a hand," he snapped back, his pride a brittle, angry thing. "I need a new battery." But then he looked up the rest of the long, unforgiving hill, and the fight seemed to drain out of him. He sighed, a sound of pure, weary defeat that I knew all too well. "Yes, son," he finally admitted, his voice now a quiet, humbled whisper. "I believe I do." I put down my heavy portfolio. "Okay," I said. "On 3. The next 20 minutes were a grueling, sweat-drenched, and strangely beautiful struggle. The wheelchair was a monster, a dead weight of steel and rubber, and the old man, whose name I learned was Walter, was a proud and surprisingly funny curmudgeon. As we fought our way up that hill, inch by painful inch, we talked. He complained about the city, about the weather, about the uselessness of modern technology. I complained about the pretentiousness of the art world. We were 2 strangers, from 2 different generations, 2 different worlds, and we were bound together by a shared and deeply human moment of struggle.
When we finally, blessedly, reached the top of the hill, where a small bus stop shelter stood, we were both breathing heavily, a sheen of sweat on our faces. "Well," he said, a new and unfamiliar look of respect in his sharp blue eyes, "I don't know how I would have managed that without you, son. Let me pay you for your trouble." He began to reach for his wallet. "No, sir," I said, shaking my head. "Don't you worry about it. Just have a better day." He just looked at me for a long, silent moment. "You're a good kid," he finally said. And then he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod of what looked like genuine approval. I watched as the bus arrived a few minutes later, the hydraulic lift lowering to allow him to board. I walked the final block back to my apartment building, my own muscles aching with a satisfying, unfamiliar burn. The act of helping the old man, Walter, had been a strange and surprisingly potent antidote to my own self-pity. For a few brief moments, I had forgotten about my own looming eviction, about the failure of my artistic dreams, and I had just been a man helping another man up a hill. That feeling, of course, evaporated the second I walked into my apartment and saw the stark white eviction notice still sitting on my kitchen table, a silent paper and ink tombstone for my life in this city. The night was long and sleepless. I didn't pack. The act felt too final, too much like a surrender. Instead, I just sat in the quiet, moonlit chaos of my studio, looking at my own unfinished canvases, the ghosts of 100 paintings I had dreamed of but never had the time or the money to create. My silent sacrifice was not just the rent I couldn't pay, it was the life I couldn't live. A life of creativity that was being slowly and methodically choked to death by the harsh and unforgiving reality of the world. I thought of the old man, of his stubborn, grumpy pride, and of the quiet, surprising dignity he had possessed. I hoped he had gotten home safely, and then I didn't think of him again. He was a brief, passing chapter in a book that was about to be slammed shut. The next morning, I was woken not by my alarm, but by a shaft of bright, unforgiving sunlight on my face. It was 10 a.m., the hour of my execution. My landlord, Mr. Thorne, a man who valued punctuality and profit above all else, was due to arrive any minute to finalize the eviction paperwork and to take my keys. I took a shower. I put on my best, least paint-stained shirt. I would not face this final humiliation as a victim. I would face it as a man. At precisely 10:15, 15 minutes late, a fact I knew he would hold against me, there was a sharp, authoritative knock on my door. This was it.
I took a deep, steadying breath, a silent apology to my own failed dreams on my lips, and I walked to the door. I steeled myself for the cold, condescending look in Mr. Thorne's eyes. I opened the door, and my world, which was already at a dead end, took a sudden, sharp, and completely incomprehensible left turn. Standing in the hallway was my landlord, Mr. Thorne. He was dressed in his usual immaculate business suit, his face a mask of grim, impatient purpose, the eviction papers held in his hand like a weapon. But he was not alone. Standing just behind him, looking slightly awkward and deeply uncomfortable, was the old man from the hill, Walter. I just stared, my mind a complete chaotic blank, unable to process the impossible scene in front of me. What was he doing here? Was he a friend of my landlord? Was this some kind of a bizarre, cruel coincidence? My landlord, Mr. Thorne, was the first to speak, and his voice was full of a sharp, familial irritation that was completely out of place. "Dad?" he said, his voice an incredulous squeak of pure, unadulterated shock. "What on earth are you doing here? I told you I had a business matter to attend to this morning." Dad. The word hit me like a physical blow. The grumpy, proud, and stubborn old man I had pushed up a hill yesterday was not just any old man. He was my landlord's estranged father. Walter, the old man, just ignored his son. He looked at me, a look of genuine, warm recognition in his sharp blue eyes.
"I came to thank this young man properly," he said, his voice a gravelly rumble. "He showed me a great kindness yesterday, when others would not." Mr. Thorne's gaze shifted from his father to me and back again, a new, dawning, and deeply suspicious understanding on his face. "This is the man you were talking about?" he asked his father. "Yes," Walter said. He then looked past his son and saw the official-looking eviction notice in his hand. He looked at my own pale, worried face, and the full, beautiful, and deeply ironic picture of the situation finally clicked into place for him. He turned to his son, and his expression, which had been one of a quiet, grateful dignity, was now transformed. The grumpy, stubborn old man was gone, and in his place was a father. A powerful and deeply, deeply disappointed father. "A business matter?" he said, his voice now a low, dangerous rumble that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hallway. "So this is your business, son? Evicting the one man in this entire miserable city who was kind enough and decent enough to help your own old man when he was stranded and alone?" I stood in my own doorway, a silent, stunned witness, trapped between my angry, unforgiving landlord, Mr. Thorne, and his furious and deeply disappointed father, Walter. The air in the narrow hallway was thick with the weight of a family drama that had been simmering for years, and it had just by a bizarre twist of fate boiled over on my doorstep. Mr. Thorne, who had been a titan of cold, business-like authority just moments before, now looked like a small, guilty schoolboy who had just been caught by the principal. He stared at his father, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. "Dad," he stammered, his voice a pathetic, weak thing that was a world away from his usual booming confidence. This isn't what it looks like. This is a simple business matter. Mr. He glanced at me, forgetting my name for a moment. "Wyatt is 3 months behind on his rent. I have a legal obligation to—"
A legal obligation? Walter cut him off, his voice a low, sad rumble of a disappointment so profound it was a physical thing. "What about your moral obligation, Thomas? Your human obligation?" He gestured with his chin towards me. "I have spent the last 5 years of my life in that wheelchair, in that lonely apartment you so dutifully pay for but so rarely visit. And in all that time, you have been too busy with your business matters to see me more than once or twice a year. You call me a burden, a stubborn old fool who refuses your help." He then looked at me, and his eyes, those sharp, intelligent blue eyes, were full of a quiet, powerful respect. "And this young man," he said, his voice now ringing with a fierce, protective pride, "a complete stranger, a young man with his own clear and obvious struggles, saw me, a man in need, and he did not hesitate. He did not see a burden. He saw a human being. He pushed me and my 200-pound wheelchair up that godforsaken hill with his own 2 hands, with his own sweat. He showed me more genuine, selfless compassion in 20 minutes than my own son has shown me in 5 years." He turned his gaze back to his son, and it was a look of such profound and deeply felt shame that my landlord, Mr. Thorne, actually flinched. "And your response, your son's response, is to throw this good and decent man out onto the street? That is not business, Thomas," he said, his voice now a low, dangerous whisper. "That is a failure of character, a failure of your own humanity, a failure as my son." The words so raw, so honest, and so full of a lifetime of a father's disappointed love finally, completely broke through my landlord's hard corporate shell. He didn't get angry. He just crumpled. The rigid, powerful posture of the businessman dissolved, leaving behind the slumped, defeated posture of a sad and deeply wounded son. "I tried, Dad," he whispered, his voice a raw, broken thing, his eyes shining with unshed tears.
I tried to help you. I offered to get you a better apartment, a full-time nurse. You wouldn't let me in. You pushed me away." "I didn't want a nurse," Walter roared, his own voice now full of a matching pain. "I wanted my son." The two men just stood there in the hallway, two strangers, a father and a son, separated by a chasm of their own making. And I, the poor, struggling artist who was about to be evicted, was the one and only witness to their painful and long overdue reconciliation. Walter finally took a deep, shuddering breath, bringing the raw, emotional moment to a close. He looked at the official-looking eviction notice still clutched in his son's trembling hand. With a slow, deliberate motion, he reached out and took the papers from him. He did not look at them. He just slowly and very deliberately tore the eviction notice into 4 perfect and deeply satisfying pieces. He let the scraps of paper, the remnants of my own looming doom, flutter to the floor of the hallway. He then looked at his son. "The eviction," he said, his voice now a quiet, final command, "is canceled." He then turned to me, a new, strange, and almost mischievous glint in his eye. "And as for the back rent you owe, Wyatt," he continued, "I believe my son and I will be taking care of that. Consider it a down payment," he said, a slow, meaningful smile spreading across his face, "on our own, long overdue and deeply necessary family therapy." The air was thick with the weight of a lifetime of unspoken words.
It was Walter who broke the silence. He looked past his son, into my cluttered, paint-splattered studio apartment. "Well," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble, "it seems we have a great deal to discuss, and this young man's hallway is certainly not the place to do it." He then looked at me, his sharp blue eyes full of a strange, new warmth. "Wyatt, my son tells me you likely have a kettle. After the day we have all had, I believe we could all use a strong cup of tea." It was not a request. It was the gentle but undeniable command of a man who was used to taking charge. I just nodded dumbly and stepped back, holding the door open. The 3 of us, the landlord, his father, and the tenant he had just tried to evict, trooped awkwardly into my small, chaotic living room. The contrast was almost comical. These 2 men, in their expensive, perfectly tailored suits, now sitting amidst my own beautiful, paint-splattered, and deeply unprofitable mess. I made tea. We sat in a strange, tense silence, the only sound the whistling of the kettle. When I brought the mugs back into the room, I found the 2 men not looking at each other, but at my work. My paintings, which were stacked against every wall, were a testament to my own lonely, struggling existence. "You have talent, son," Walter said quietly, his eyes fixed on a large, unfinished canvas of a stormy seascape. Before I could thank him, his son, my landlord, spoke, his voice a quiet, wounded thing. "I tried, Dad," he whispered, his gaze fixed on the floor. "After Mom died, I tried to help you. I offered to get you a better apartment, a full-time nurse, anything you wanted. You wouldn't let me in. You pushed me away every single time." "I didn't want a nurse," he roared, his own voice now full of a matching, ancient pain. "I wanted my son. I wanted you to come and sit with me, not to send your assistant. I wanted you to talk to me about your mother, not about my stock portfolio." And then I watched as my landlord, a man I had only ever known as a cold, ruthless businessman, began to cry. Quietly, at first, and then with the deep, racking sobs of a man who had been holding back a lifetime of his own grief. He told his father of his own loneliness, of his own pain, of the crushing pressure he had felt to be the strong, successful man his father had always demanded,
a man who had no time for the weakness of tears. And I, the quiet, struggling artist who was about to be made homeless, I just sat there, a silent witness to their painful, beautiful, and long overdue reconciliation. After a long, long time, the tears subsided, leaving behind a fragile and deeply sacred peace. It was Walter who spoke first. He looked at me, his eyes full of a profound and deeply moving gratitude. "Wyatt, my son and I, we have a very long road ahead of us to try and fix what we have broken. But none of this," he said, gesturing between himself and his now silent, red-eyed son, "none of this healing would have happened without you. Your simple, decent, and selfless act of kindness to a grumpy old stranger on a hill, it has reminded us both of what is truly important." Then he looked at his son. "Thomas," he said now, his voice a quiet, firm command, "you were going to evict this young man. That is a stain on our family's honor, and you will correct it." My landlord, Thomas Thorne, looked at me, and for the first time I saw not a landlord but a man, a flawed and deeply shamed man. "He's right," he whispered. He stood up and walked over to me. "Wyatt, I am deeply and profoundly sorry for my behavior, for everything." He took a deep breath. "The back rent you owe is forgiven, of course. And," he said, the words clearly difficult for him, "I would be honored if you would consider staying on here as my guest for the next 12 months, rent-free."
I was stunned. I was speechless. A whole year of not having to worry about the rent, of being able to just paint. It was a gift of a magnitude I could not comprehend. "And one more thing," Walter added, his eyes now twinkling as they landed on the large, stormy seascape on my easel. "I believe I am in the market for a new painting for my study. I will pay whatever price you ask." The weeks that followed were a quiet and profound revolution in my own small, quiet life. My landlord, Thomas, was true to his word. The constant, crushing, and soul-deep weight of my financial anxiety, a weight that I had been carrying for years, simply lifted. For the first time since I had decided to pursue my art, I was not just a survivor, I was an artist. I painted. I painted with a freedom and a joy I had not felt since I was a child. I didn't have to worry about whether a piece was commercial enough to sell. I just created. My small apartment, which had once been a prison of overdue bills, was now a true studio, a sanctuary of color and light, and a new, boundless hope. A week after that fateful morning, Walter, the old man from the hill, came to my apartment. He did not come with his son. He came alone. He came to see the painting, the stormy seascape that had caught his eye. He stood before it for a long, silent time, his sharp blue eyes taking in every brushstroke. "It's magnificent," he finally said, his voice a low, appreciative rumble. "It reminds me of my wife. She loved the ocean in a storm." He then wrote me a check for the painting, a sum so generous it made my hands tremble. It was not a handout. It was the respectful payment of a patron to an artist. That day was the beginning of our strange and wonderful friendship. Every Sunday afternoon, like clockwork, Walter and his son, Thomas, would come to my small paint-splattered apartment. They would bring coffee and pastries, and the three of us, the gruff, reclusive patriarch, the newly humbled businessman's son, and the quiet, struggling artist, would sit and we would talk. We would talk about art, about business, about life, about the strange and beautiful and sometimes terrible journey of being a father and a son. I learned that Thomas, my landlord, was not a monster. He was just a man who had spent his entire life desperately trying and failing to earn the approval of a father he both loved and feared. And I learned that Walter, the powerful billionaire, was just a lowly old man who had been so consumed by his own grief and pride that he had almost lost the one thing in the world that truly mattered to him. I had not just pushed a man up a hill. I had, in some small, strange, and deeply accidental way, pushed a father and a son back towards each other. It has been a year now. I am standing not in my small, cluttered apartment, but in the center of a bright, white, and beautiful art gallery in the city's most prestigious district. It is the night of my first sold-out solo exhibition. The room is filled with the quiet, appreciative murmur of the city's most important critics and collectors. And on the main wall, the centerpiece of the entire show, is the stormy seascape. A small, elegant brass plaque beneath it that reads, "From the private collection of the Thorne family." Across the room, I see them, my landlord Thomas and his father Walter. They are not just my patrons, they are my friends, my family. They are standing together, laughing, a father and a son, their own long and difficult restoration project now complete. I think back to that long ago afternoon, to my own feeling of utter, hopeless defeat. I had thought my life was over, that my dreams were a failure. I had no idea that my own salvation was waiting for me, disguised as a grumpy old man in a broken-down wheelchair at the bottom of a very steep hill. I had not just been given a year of free rent, I had been given my life back. And the greatest work of art I had ever been a part of was not a painting on a wall. It was the messy, difficult, and beautiful restoration of a broken family. An absolutely beautiful story about how a simple act of kindness can change a family forever. What do you think of Walter's unusual method of testing people's character? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were touched by this wonderful story of a second chance, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more heartwarming stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.